Hello, I'm Jeremy Appel, and this is Headlines, your periodic daily news podcast from the Orchard. If you like the work I do and have the means, please consider becoming a paid subscriber so I can continue doing it. Here are some of the top news stories for Tuesday, May 26th, 2026. Today, we begin with news that just broke as I was preparing for this episode. CTV News first reported that former Environment and Climate Change Minister Stephen Guilbeault is resigning as an MP. According to the report from Vashi Kapelos and Stephanie Ha, Guilbeault intends to inform the Liberal caucus of his decision tomorrow. According to the Globe and Mail, Guilbeault then plans to make the announcement in the House of Commons later in the afternoon. Guilbeault is a former environmental activist with the organization Equiterre. He was first elected to represent the Montreal riding of Laurier-Sainte-Marie in 2019. The riding has been represented by former Bloc Québécois leader Gilles Duceppe and more recently by Hélène Laverdière of the NDP. Guilbeault became the public face of then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's climate agenda and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's favorite punching bag when he was appointed Environment Minister in 2021. Guilbeault pursued a series of relatively tough climate policies, including a national net zero energy grid target for 2035 and what would have been the world's first oil and gas emissions cap. These policies have been dismantled by Prime Minister Mark Carney. He signed an agreement with Danielle Smith in November 2025 to pursue a new tar sands pipeline to the West Coast and subsidize a massive carbon capture hub pushed by big oil. This prompted Guilbeault's resignation from cabinet. Carney and Smith signed a supplemental agreement earlier this month to substantially weaken the federal industrial carbon price. Kapelos and Ha report that Guilbeault's resignation is directly tied to concerns over the trajectory of federal climate policy, which also include the gutting of endangered species, water, and health protections. Stephen, go on the Orchard Cast. Staying in Ottawa, where Prime Minister Mark Carney has said the House of Commons won't be debating Alberta's October referendum on whether to have a future independence referendum. The 2000 Clarity Act requires the House of Commons to affirm whether a provincial secession referendum question would provide a clear expression of the will of the majority. But since October's referendum isn't directly asking whether Albertans want to separate, Carney said the Clarity Act need not apply. In response to the 1995 Quebec independence referendum, which was defeated in a razor-thin vote, the federal government of the day asked the Supreme Court of Canada for its opinion on how to proceed in the event of a future provincial secession referendum. That begot the 1998 Quebec reference, which determined that after a clear majority votes in favor of a clear question on independence, Quebec must enter negotiations with the federal government in other provinces to determine how to proceed. 2 years later, the Clarity Act brought the Supreme Court's reference into law. Carney made his comments about the applicability of the Clarity Act to Alberta's referendum in response to questioning from Bloc Québécois MP Christine Normandin, who argued the feds shouldn't interfere with Albertans' right to decide their fate. While he won't intervene in Alberta's referendum on a referendum, Carney has called Premier Danielle Smith's decision to put it on the ballot a, quote, very dangerous bluff. Speaking of Alberta, Separatist leader Mitch Sylvester says that he's mobilizing support within the ruling United Conservative Party to force either an early leadership review of Premier Danielle Smith or a change to October's referendum question. Sylvester is the CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project and led a petition drive for an independence referendum with an organization called Stay Free Alberta. Importantly, he's also the president of the UCP Constituency Association for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul. CBC columnist Jason Markusoff reports that Sylvester has a few tricks up his sleeve to either remove Smith from power or push the UCP in an avowedly separatist direction. Court of King's Bench Justice Shayna Leonard ruled in mid-May that Sylvester's petition drive should have never been approved without the government first consulting First Nations, whose treaty rights would be called into question by a successful independence vote. Sylvester claims his petition received more than 300,000 signatures, but that has not been independently verified. He also claims, for what it's worth, that King Charles wants to assassinate him. Stay Free Alberta is appealing Leonard's ruling, which Premier Smith has said her government will support. Smith was quite transparent when announcing October's referendum within a referendum that it was a way to buy time while the matter is in court. But she also said she will be voting against pursuing a referendum, which has upset the separatists she has rolled out the red carpet for until now. If Sylvester can secure the support of a quarter of the UCP's 87 constituency associations, he can force a special general meeting of the party for the summer or fall. He told Markusoff that he's 50-50 on whether to challenge Smith's leadership or to force a vote on officially declaring the UCP a separatist party. Party president Rob Smith has said the UCP will remain neutral on whether to pursue an independence referendum, acknowledging deep divisions within the party. Sylvester said he'll have a final decision on his preferred course of action in the next couple of weeks. We end today with a media story. The Canadian Association of Defense and Security Industries, or CADSI, has banned anti-militarist media from its CanSec trade show this week in Ottawa. The annual arms fair attracts hundreds of weapons companies and dozens of politicians. Some of this year's speakers include Canadian Defense Minister David McGuinty, Industry Minister Melanie Joly, and former U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Alex Kosh of the Maple reports that he applied for accreditation to this year's event, but received an email from organizers saying the Maple doesn't meet their eligibility requirements. And he wasn't the only one. Independent journalist Christy Somos, who writes the State of Things newsletter here on Substack, sought to cover the trade show for The Walrus magazine, but was told the event was at capacity. I wondered if it was more to do with my coverage being critical of the Ottawa military establishment, Somos told the Maple, especially as I had a former high-ranking member of the CAF agree to vouch for me. In 2023, organizers prohibited The Breach from attending that year's show, explicitly citing the online news outlets' quote-unquote aggressively critical anti-war journalism. They said they would be willing to reconsider if The Breach promised to provide positive coverage. The 2026 CanSec Fair is sponsored by major weapons companies, including BAE Systems, Boeing, CAE, Northrop Grumman, and Rochelle, the provincial economic development agencies for Ontario and Nova Scotia, and the University of Toronto. Activists had attempted to pressure the Canadian government to ban Elbit Systems, an Israeli arms company from which Scotiabank recently divested from participating. This year's event comes as Prime Minister Mark Carney has committed to a major increase in defense spending to reach NATO's target of 5% of GDP by 2035. CADSI President and CEO Christine Cianfrani has promised this year's fair will be our biggest yet, citing what she called a dramatic shift over the past 12 months in how Canada's federal government views and approaches defense. We recognize that with increased interest in the defense sector will come greater scrutiny, she wrote in the CanSec press kit. Those are your headlines for Tuesday, May 26th, 2026. Again, if you value my work and would like to see more of it, please consider becoming a paid Orchard subscriber. Catch you next time.